Welcome back to Google DeepMind, the podcast with me, your host, Professor Hannah Fry. Now, okay, those of you who've been following us from the beginning, you will know that using artificial intelligence to enhance a scientific understanding of the world has always been a key goal of the team here. You've got weather forecasting that's advanced meteorology, you've got nuclear fusion for physicists, and perhaps most notably is AlphaFold, which has been an absolute game changer for biology. But if all of that seems a little bit academic, a bit niche perhaps, the kind of stuff that should only really be exciting to a handful of scientists in their labs, well then hopefully today's episode will persuade you of the substantial impact that these ideas can have on humanity. Because I am joined once again by the guy who is in charge of scientific research here at Google DeepMind, Pushmeet Kohli. Pushmeet, thank you so much for joining us back on the podcast. Quite a lot has happened since we last spoke to you. How many Nature papers have you got now?
I'm not really sure. We're not counting.
Too many to count.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk to you about AlphaFold because it feels as though this is one of the most exciting things that has advanced even further since I last spoke to you. And I should say actually that anybody who wants to know more about how AlphaFold works and what it does can go back to episode 1 of the previous series for more detail. But I guess just briefly, can you summarize what AlphaFold is?
Yeah. So AlphaFold is a system that, given a protein, proteins make everything around us. They are the building blocks of life. And essentially, they can be represented as a sequence of amino acids. And it's a great mystery as to what is the structure of any given protein. So if you're given a sequence of these amino acids, a protein, what is its structure? And that's really important because that informs the function of that protein. What AlphaFold does, it takes a sequence of a protein and predicts its structure. And that's really important for scientists to understand what is the function of that protein. So that's what AlphaFold did. It solved that 50-year-old grand challenge in science by making scientists able to find the structure of any given protein in a matter of seconds.
So I guess actually a more accurate statement would be it was a mystery, but is no longer.
Yeah, I mean, there's still sort of a few things that are unknown about how proteins sort of behave, the dynamics of the proteins and so on. But this one standard big problem in protein understanding, what is the structure of a protein, is now we now know about it.
So what's changed since last time then? Since the last series, when there was AlphaFold 2, what can AlphaFold 3 do that the previous versions couldn't?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Now, I said proteins are the building blocks of life, but they are not the only molecules in our body. Our body has many other biomolecules. We have nucleic acids, RNA, DNA, which are the recipe of sort of life, what makes you and me, Hannah. Then there are small molecules, drugs that that interact with these proteins. There are antibodies. There are so many different types of molecules that are interacting in any living being. And we want to understand the structure of all these molecules. And that's what AlphaFold 3 unlocks. It not only gives you the structure of a protein, but it also gives you the structure of how do these protein sort of form complexes, or they connect to each other, or how do they interact with small molecules or antibodies and so on.
What's been the reaction then from scientists now that this has had a bit of time to sort of be out there in the world?
So it was very hard to actually, for my background, I'm a computer scientist by training, and it was very hard for me to actually understand the impact of AlphaFold. And the first time I realized, I went to a conference, a biology conference, where a biologist sort of spoke to me and said, well, there was this protein that I've been trying to study for the last 10 years. And I have collected so much data about it, but still the structure of that protein was a mystery.
Because it was so hard to work out what the structure might be before AlphaFold.
Exactly, and the scientists had used AlphaFold and had the structure, and then the question he had was, well, what do I do now? Right, I have the structure. And so they have to he had to completely rethink what biology requires now in
Oh,
terms of the
wow.
next steps.
A 10-year project.
Yeah.
And it just put it into AlphaFold and it sorted it out for him in a few minutes or
Exactly.
maybe overnight. Was he excited or was that in some ways a bit demoralizing?
No, I mean, I think there was a mixture of both surprise, but also excitement. Something that you wouldn't imagine. It's like, imagine giving people the ability, an ability that did not exist. Imagine the first time telephones came about, right? And you could now talk to people who are miles away. This was unimaginable. So and the fact that you can take any protein, you can put in the sequence of that protein and visualize what the 3D structure is, that just gave these scientists a superpower that they had not imagined earlier. And there was a lot of excitement as to what we could do with that superpower.
And is that how people are feeling? Like they've got a superpower now?
Yeah. So one of the things that we have seen is AlphaFold database. So we created this AlphaFold database, which is we found the structures of almost all known proteins, and we put the structures for those in a database hosted by the European Microbiology Lab, our partners, MBLEBI. And this was available. These 250 million structures were available to anyone in the world for free. And that particular database has been used across 140 countries by 1.8 million scientists. And the fact that there are 1.8 million scientists who are looking for protein structures, I mean, if that is not a positive statement about the state of the world, then I don't know what is, right? I mean, we think about the doom and gloom in society, but if you look at how science has progressed, there are 1.8 million people who are studying proteins.
So I think the really notable thing when you talk to people about AlphaFold is just how big of a difference there is between the people who understand it, that 1.8 million people, and sort of everybody else. Is this something that you notice as well? AlphaFold doesn't, it feels a bit technical to really understand the magnitude of it. What are the applications that you are excited about that other people will understand?
Yeah. So I think for a large section of the community, they sort of see AlphaFold as an AI breakthrough in the sciences. But the scientists sort of who work on this topic understand the implications of it in a very deep way, right? They know the implications of AlphaFold for extremely important things like drug discovery, designing a new vaccine, thinking about antimicrobial resistance, thinking about new enzymes to decompose plastics. I can just go on and on and on, right?
But that's not the only project that has been going on in here since we last spoke to you. So tell us a little bit more about what you've been working on.
So we have been working on a whole spectrum of different topics, from material science to fusion to working on new discoveries in computer science, in mathematics, weather prediction, meteorology. So there's a whole sort of spectrum of areas that we are looking at.
And of those, where do you think there's been really significant progress in the last couple of years?
Yeah, so one of the moments that we can talk about is our work on weather prediction. Weather and climate is something that we are all sort of thinking about at the moment. But if you look at what DeepMind had done earlier, we had our nowcasting model, which was able to make very good prediction, but at very short timescales. With our new model called GraphCast, which we released last year, we can now look at the problem of 10-day forecasts. And what we have shown that this new model can make these 10-day predictions more accurately than some of the models that are being used, the classical models that are being used by the Met Office.
The supercomputers.
Yes, which run on supercomputers for many hours. And we can outperform them in terms of accuracy and make predictions in a matter of a minute on a single chip. I think, in some sense, this really opens up research in this area. So a lot of other people, a lot of other entities can now conduct research in weather prediction, and the results are amazing. Like one particular example that was fascinating is that there was this cyclone, Hurricane Lee, last year, which made landfall in Nova Scotia. And our model, GraphCast, was able to make the prediction of the landfall event 9 days earlier.
Wow.
While the classical models were only able to do it 6 days earlier. So they could give a 3-day additional heads up.
It's a superpower that doesn't just apply to biology then.
Absolutely. I mean, like the amount of impact that AI and machine learning is having across all these disciplines is amazing. And if you think about it, it feels natural because in any of these areas of science, we are collecting a lot of data, and the complexity of models that we are playing with and we are working with is really expanding. And it's just very natural that a single human mind has difficulty in sort of comprehending what are the real patterns in this data. And machine learning and AI just give you that ability to figure out what is needed in many of these problems.
Okay, you mentioned material science there. Frame for us the general problem, as it were, in material science pre-AI.
Yeah. So what is the problem of material discovery? You want to discover materials which have certain properties, right? We have gone through all these ages from the Stone Age to the Iron Age to the Bronze Age and so on, right? And at every age we are working with a new material, and new material gives us new abilities. And the problem of material discovery is to discover materials which have certain useful properties. Now, how was that done till now? It was done in a very experimental sort of way. People tried different things in the lab. Sometimes the things worked out as expected. Sometimes things didn't work out as expected. But there was there were some rules of thumb. There was some theory, but we did not know the extent to what was possible in materials.
Often things get discovered by accident, right? Like vulcanized rubber, or
exactly.
Yeah, just sort of a chance happening in a lab.
Yeah.
And then a new material that turns out to be really useful pops up.
Exactly. Like graphene, right? Where we all sort of know about the story about how this magical sort of material was isolated by sellotapes, right? By taking sort of pieces of sort of carbon and then repeatedly sort of making it thinner and thinner by a sticky tape, and it has amazing sort of properties.
Ending up being the thinnest substance that can be manufactured, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
A single atom thick.
Yes, and it has sort of very interesting properties in terms of conductivity and so on. So before AI and before even computational sort of methods, that's essentially was the norm, that people, and even today in some sense, material science is a very experimental science where people are trying to discover new materials for whether it's for constructing a battery or for a photovoltaic cell or for a superconductor and so on. Now, how computational systems are used today is to then post hoc rationalize why is that material behaving in a way that it's behaving. But we are very far from the place where we could rationally design a material. Given a property, you say, find me the material, invent a new material which can maximize these properties. And that's what the problem is for AI. Can we somehow in silico, de novo, from scratch, right? Start to invent any given material with some property,
so that you can go in,
yeah,
and say, I want something that is extraordinarily flexible, extraordinarily light,
yeah,
whatever, easy to mine, something.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, here's the physical structure of the atomic structure that will result in that material.
Exactly. That's the vision, right?
Okay, let's anchor this to an example then. So you mentioned batteries there.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got batteries.
Yeah.
What's wrong with the batteries we have?
Yeah, so I think they're doing well, right? They're lithium ion batteries. There are a number of issues with that. First, they are based on certain resources which are difficult. For example, the lithium ion batteries, the batteries used today use cobalt, which is difficult to sort of mine. We might want to increase the energy density of these batteries in the future. We might want to make them more thermally stable. We might want to make them cheaper. And if you could somehow have a magic sort of material which can have higher energy density, is more stable, is easy to manufacture, then of course you would want to sort of transition to it.
And find it without just waiting for an accident to happen in a lab.
Exactly.
Are you sure there is one, though? How do you know that lithium isn't just the best that the universe has to offer?
Yeah, I mean, it could be that lithium is the best, and we were extremely lucky, and we found it. But that seems very sort of remote. I mean, there is the number of materials. Just to give you an example, there were around 20,000 inorganic sort of materials that people sort of play with. Now, using computational methods, 28,000 have been sort of found out. So they are roughly sort of 50,000 sort of known materials that were known to be stable, in the sense that at 0 Kelvin, or like under some theoretical situations, they will not decompose to other materials.
Oh,
right?
okay. So if you freeze them right down to absolute zero,
yeah,
they don't split apart.
Exactly. So
okay.
they are stable materials. So that was what was known in the material science community. Our new AI model, GNOME, last year expanded that set and said there are 2.2 million new inorganic materials that are stable.
From 50,000?
Yes.
Wow. Okay, wow. That's massive.
Right. And we were talking about graphene. There are 52,000 single chain layered materials in that set. So the number of possibilities, the number of things that now we can search over is immense. And you asked the question whether the lithium sort of cobalt sort of batteries are the optimal sort of batteries. Well, there are so many things in that 2.2 million set that one of them could be much, much better.
Yeah, I mean, the chances that lithium is actually quite... Okay, right. What's it called? GNOME?
Yes.
What does it stand for?
Graph Neural Networks for Material Exploration.
Okay. And how does it work? How are you deciding new material structures that haven't yet been discovered?
So it's essentially sort of tries to start with existing structures and compositions.
50,000 that we know.
Yeah. And says, okay, let me change some of those. And then I'll learn a model to say which of those changes, which of those modified sort of materials are stable or not stable. Right. So and it is able to do those calculations very efficiently. And that's where the machine learning model comes in. Right. It's able to make predictions about the stability and the free energy of these new compositions and these new crystal structures in a much more accurate way.
So in one sense then, taking the 50,000 and then sort of doing some kind of atomic shuffling, if you like, just trying different combinations. Yeah. But then the clever bit as you're describing it is that you can calculate without actually having made ever this sort of fantasy material, which has been constructed by atomic shuffling. Yeah. You can tell whether or not it will be stable at 0 degree Kelvin if you made it.
Yes.
How?
You can do that theoretically, but you will need to do a lot of very complex calculations. And what this model is able to do is basically approximate those calculations and do it much, much computationally inexpensively.
So in many ways, actually, I can see the similarities between this and AlphaFold. That you're talking about the atomic structure of something, like right down at the level, I mean, amino acids and atoms. Yeah. And then sort of predicting larger structural properties as a result.
Yeah. So in this particular case, you are given a new crystal structure or a new composition, and you are told, is it going to be stable or not? And the model is able to say that.
How do you validate it, though?
So we have validated these in two ways. One form of validation is by doing calculations. So when I said these are 2.2 million stable structures, what do I mean? How do I say that these are stable? Uh, there are theories in quantum chemistry which give us approaches to figure out whether something is going to be stable. These are very difficult calculations. So we can run those calculations on the predictions that Noam has made and see whether the theory says that those will be stable, right? So that's one way. And then we have also taken a subset of the most stable predictions and then experimentally try to validate them in the lab.
Oh, what, like build it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, but then hold on. If it's sort of giving you some fantasy atomic structure, does it tell you how to make it?
No, it doesn't.
Oh, okay.
Right. So then we have to figure out how do you make it?
Yeah. And you have managed to do this with a small number of them?
Yes.
Right. And do they hold up? Are they stable?
Yeah. And large proportion of them are stable.
Give me numbers.
Yeah. So I think this is constantly sort of changing, but these are the success rates are sort of quite high, between 70 to 90% of those that we try in the lab end up being stable. And then now once we have those valid materials, then we also have to think about what are the properties of those materials. Now, which of them would be better batteries, or would be useful in photovoltaics, or would be good in superconductivity, and so on.
So can it also predict the properties then?
So no, not our
just
current generation.
Structures.
It just sort of makes the predictions about the stability of those structures, but we are working on new models for these other types of problems.
What kind of materials are you hoping for? I mean, battery materials is one example. What other kind of things are you hoping that Noam will help develop?
Yeah, so one of the key things that people have been thinking about is materials that can exhibit superconductivity.
And which we mean?
Which means basically they exhibit zero resistance. Right. And why is that important? That's important because if you have such a material, you can create very strong magnetic fields. You can store a lot of energy using those materials. Why are magnetic fields important? They're important from everything to do with MRI scanners to creating fusion reactors. The magnets that are used in fusion reactors require very high magnetic fields. So superconductivity is an extremely important property.
And at the moment, you have to super cool things in order to be able to get up to those high levels, because otherwise it just gets too hot.
Exactly. And so what is the holy grail in material science is to discover a room temperature superconductor. And there have been many attempts at it and some false starts.
And some quite cheeky pretending
that's
happened too.
Yes, yeah, that too. But I think if one day, if we discover it, it will be transformational.
And do you think AI will be involved in that discovery?
Yeah, I'm absolutely sure that AI will aid in the search for superconductors.
At the very least, accelerate the process.
Exactly.
So, okay, that part of making it though.
Yeah.
I mean, the way that you described it was like, we've got to figure out how to make it. So
yeah.
Feels like we're skipping over quite a bit of a tricky part of the process. Is there any way that you can automate that bit too?
Yeah. Once you know what the material is, then it's a whole, there is another sort of stream of material science work, which is how do you make something cheaply, right? And there is a lot of work happening in that area as well. But at the moment, our team is looking more on the discovery side. And just to say, right, we have to be also be cautious in saying that a lot of it, yes, there are these 2.2 million materials, but how many of them, as you said, are valid materials, right, which actually will prove out when synthesized, how many of them are useful and will have interesting material properties? All of that are open questions. So, but I think the fact that there is this new place that we find ourselves in that from 20,000 to 2.2 million, it's a different ballgame.
Absolutely. Okay, here's another open question.
Yeah.
How long do you think it will be before the first AI developed or material developed with the assistance of AI makes a big difference?
Yeah. So I think unlike biology, material science is much more experimental at the moment, right? Drug discovery is still, and biology is still has used computational method, but material science is much more experimental. So it will take time. But I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we will see really, as I say, in silico material design starting to make a big impact.
So I want to zoom out a little bit further, right? Because so you're sitting here talking to us very confidently about material science, but also about biology, and you're a computer scientist, right? So how come you got into this?
The last time I studied science was in school, and I came to DeepMind hoping to work on general intelligence systems and make them safe and reliable. But I was always fascinated about how can intelligent systems have real world impact. And that's what I used to keep on sort of having discussions with Demis with. And one day he comes to my office and says, "Oh, Pushmeet, I think we have a good role for you." And I said, "Okay, what's the role?" And I was assuming some sort of product area that I'm going to finally use machine learning for. And he said, "We want to start a science team and you should lead it." And I said, "Why me? Like science, I have no background. I mean, I studied science in school. I loved it at school, but then I became a computer scientist, and then that's what I did." But he said, "Well, see, you are into multidisciplinary research. You want to understand the problems and you want to have real world impact. And what better place to have impact in pushing the boundaries of knowledge forward in the natural sciences?" So I said, "Okay," I agreed. And then over the next sort of couple of months, I found what I've got myself into, because if somebody was designing a job to experience imposter syndrome, this is the job. Because you will be working with Nobel Prize winners and trying to understand those problems, and you don't have no clue, and you're trying to make a difference, and you start from Wikipedia. so you start from Wikipedia. Yeah, exactly. You start from Wikipedia and then and try to get a crash course in the area. But I mean, the scientific community is amazing. People are there who are willing to sit down with you, are willing to sort of teach you, go on that journey with you.
I guess the really key point, though, is that you really, really, really understand the heart of these algorithms. You really understand the type of systems that they can perform well in and where they can really excel. And so in some ways, I mean, the fact that you're talking about lots of different areas, meteorology on the one hand, material science on another, then biology, actually, I can see how there are these behind the scenes, these actual technical similarities between the systems that you're designing. So in many ways, being a generalist, it requires a generalist to be able to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about intelligence, what is intelligence, right? How do you create intelligence, right? Intelligence does not happen in a vacuum. Suddenly, like, you have a system which gets the intuitions and is able to make these new discoveries. It happens through experience. And what form of experience? How rich is your experience? And like this holds true for humans as well, right?
Yeah.
The amount of things that we see in our life, it gives us a different perspective. And so with these models, the richness of the data that they see, whether that data is collected by a scientist in a lab, or whether that data is generated by simulations, if it is rich enough, you want the data to be rich enough so that the model is forced to learn general concepts to explain that data. And then the other sort of element is to have good evaluation metrics. Machine learning methods are very good at cheating. They are amazing at memorization. They are like the student that can memorize anything. Right. So if you just give them a lot of data, they will memorize it. And you ask them any question which is close to the training set, and they will say, "Oh, yeah, this is the answer." But they actually don't
understand what's going on.
Exactly.
I guess that must have happened quite a lot with proteins at some point or another. Like they've peeked at the back of the textbook.
Exactly. And so what we had to do is make sure that we made that test extremely hard, made it impossible to cheat. And the true test of a good machine learning system is its ability to generalize to unseen examples, to have those to make those predictions in things which it had never seen before. And so so understanding what is the right data and what is the right evaluation metric for a different scientific discipline is one part of the problem. Was one of the things that I needed to work with our teams, and then the other part of the solution is in the design of these machine learning models and these AI models. You want to learn from data, but you also want to bake in any information that you can about the problem into the design of the model itself. And that is where domain knowledge makes a lot of sense. You don't want to start from scratch if you don't have to. So in all our projects, we started with a very multidisciplinary viewpoint. We got in experts. We asked them what was working, what was not working, and tried to inject everything that was currently known into the design of the model itself.
But it's noticeable that the common theme of everything that you've described there is where there is a version of success, right? There's a right answer that you are looking for, like the true underlying structure of the protein, whether it's truly stable or not, whether you really are predicting the weather.
Yeah.
Is that absolutely crucial then for any of these projects?
Yeah, absolutely. You really need to have a good sense of what does success look like.
So then when it comes to choosing projects, because I mean, if you are, as you say, the generalist who can, with domain-specific knowledge, adapt these algorithms to sort of anything, how do you decide what's worth your time?
So that's a very good question, and there are a number of sort of dimensions that we look at. One dimension is there data? If there's no data and there's no experience, the machine learning model will not learn by itself, right? So that's one of the sort of important considerations. The second thing, and this is something that we have also always sort of considered from the very start, is a focus on root node problems, problems that are so fundamental that once you unlock them, they have implications for a number of different applications downstream. And protein folding, as I said, had implications for drug discovery, to design new sort of enzymes for plastic decomposition and so on. And the same thing is true for materials, right? If you can understand material discovery in a transformational way, that has so many different applications.
It's much more effective than only looking at, say, one particular drug for Alzheimer's or whatever it might be. Yeah. So then do you have a list? Is there a whiteboard somewhere in this building where you have a list of potential projects and then you're evaluating them on that basis? Which ones have got good data? Which ones are more important problems than others?
Yeah, so I absolutely. We are constantly doing that. And there is a lot of uncertainty that we have to deal with. So we approach the problem in a scientific manner. We sort of conduct experiments. We do exploration studies and see, oh, yes, we are making progress. Some of our assumptions were correct. So that means that we can now make that big conviction commitment to that problem. And the other difference in how we are sort of operating is, like most of the topics that I've mentioned to you, we have very focused teams that pursue these problems. And they're not operating at the level of 6 months or 12 months. They are operating at the level of many years. They are dedicating researchers and engineers in those teams are dedicating their whole careers to that topic. So we take that responsibility very seriously as to which are the right problems that we should be working on. Like if we believe that a problem can be done at Oxford or MIT or Harvard or Berkeley or Imperial, we wouldn't want to work on it, because we want to work on the problems that really require a scale and the type of multidisciplinary team that we have to come together to solve them.
Okay, well, let's pick another topic then, because I think the big thing that the world's got very excited about in the last couple of years is generative AI, and in particular, large language models. Have you started to incorporate large language models into your research for science?
Yeah, so we are looking at it across the board. I mean, there are two main sort of themes that we are exploring. One is that till now, most of the work that we have been doing in the scientific areas, we were using structured data. So this is data, whether it's like genomic data or protein structure prediction data, where you have sequences and structures.
They're directly connected to each other.
Exactly, they're tables, right? But there's a lot of scientific intuition and knowledge which is embedded in scientific publications in free-form text. And how do you learn from that experience? From the diary entries of key scientists that have worked in that area over the last many centuries. So large language models give us the ability to now ingest all that data and to learn from all of it. So that's one key idea. The other way is basically where you use the large language model to generate answers in certain sort of domains. And one example of that is our project on algorithmic discovery, aptly named sort of fun search, which stands for function search.
It's much better named fun search. I much prefer that as
yeah. I think our team was very proud of the name. So what
the fun team?
Yeah, exactly. The fun team working on fun search. They are trying to discover new algorithms for important problems in computer science, and the model is asked, here's a problem, an important problem in computer science, whether it's a conceptual problem like the bin packing problem, wherein how do you, given a set of boxes and some items, how do you compactly pack those items in those boxes? And you might think, well, I do it at home. What's the relevance of it? It's that conceptual problem is everywhere. It's in how delivery companies go and deliver your groceries to your homes, or how cloud providers like schedule computational jobs on different computers that they have. So it's a very, very important problem in the real world. And so what this model does, it then tries to propose new algorithms. And many of those algorithms are maybe well-known algorithms that it had seen before. And we tell it, well, that's fine, but try to improve this particular part and try to refine it. And it goes on sort of trying to refine it. And sometimes it makes a mistake and we tell it, oh, here's the mistake that you've made. And it keeps on doing that. We try to get the right solutions and feed it back. And in that process, sometimes it discovers something completely new that was not known before, and ends up improving the performance or coming up with a new heuristic or a new algorithm which solves the problem in a remarkably different and much more efficient manner.
So the reason it's able to do that then is because there's this deeper network of connections between knowledge that isn't necessarily visible to us. So is that why sometimes large language models will hallucinate in a way that sort of makes sense? So I don't know, maybe one would say Marie Curie invented penicillin. And of course she didn't, but she did come up with a discovery that was really important around the same time. So it can swap over pieces of information, as it were, because it's seeing deeper connections that aren't visible to us.
Absolutely. It is basically because it's operating in that latent space, it feels that there are certain things which are related to each other. And in the case of the Marie Curie example, that was a mistake, right? And that's a problematic mistake if somebody did not know about it, right? It's incorrect information. But in our case, that's a fine mistake to have, because what we have is an evaluation function, which is coupled with fun search, which is coupled with the large language model, which can call bullshit.
Like a truth detector.
Yeah, exactly. Which can sort of call bullshit and say, oh, this doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
Very, very quickly. So then what matters is creativity. So if it comes up with something completely creative, we sort of pick that part and say, oh, yeah, great. And the bad stuff that it says, we are able to filter it out very easily.
But every now and then, the creative stuff it says is revealing something more about the underlying network of knowledge. Right. It's basically like you've harnessed hallucinations for good.
Yes. Hallucinations are good in this particular case. If you can somehow leverage creativity and sort of keep the good part and filter out all the invalid part.
So, I mean, don't let the fun team know that they can call themselves the hallucinations for good team. Now, might get ahead of themselves. So is it finding stuff that wasn't known to computer scientists or mathematicians?
Yes, absolutely. So in fact, this method, we were able to get a new result in computer science. So there is a very interesting problem called the CAPSET problem, which is trying to find independent sets in a structured graph. It's like a computational problem where you have a graph and you're trying to sort of find certain sort of nodes and edges which certain properties. And it has been studied for a long time. It's a very interesting problem in computer science. And what FunSearch was able to do was for the first time produce a result which nobody had been able to produce. And not only was it able to produce that result, but the algorithm and the program that it had generated to find that result had extremely interesting substructure and intuitions that when mathematicians who were working with us saw it, they felt that the program had extracted a new symmetry in the problem.
Oh, so it in this hallucination, it had really stumbled upon something that had been unexplored, but turned out to be true.
Yeah, and it was leveraging some very interesting property about the problem that we had not told it about.
Wow. Yeah, I can see how that might be useful. Okay, tell me about the Olympiad.
Mm-hmm. So there is the International Maths Olympiad, which is a competition that students take part in. It's some of the best students all around the world come to this competition. It has very sort of hard maths problems, and if you perform well, then you can get a sort of a bronze, silver, or gold sort of medal. The level of problems that are asked at the International Maths Olympiad are extremely hard. Like the current the current generation of AI systems, for example, even they are not able to sort of tackle those problems. But
they require an incredible level of sort of lateral thinking, of logic, of deep understanding of mathematical concept.
Absolutely.
Despite the fact that they're aimed at school children.
Yeah, absolutely. Those. They're not your normal.
They are not your normal kids.
Yes, exactly.
They're like the Demises of the world. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly, exactly. I'm sure. I don't know whether Demis participated in one, but
he did.
but yeah, they are exceptional, and it has been a long-standing challenge for a computational system to be able to solve any of these problems, because these are extremely hard mathematics problems. And mathematics, unlike the game of chess or Go, is an open-ended environment, in the sense that it does not have a specific number of moves. The moves are infinite.
And in any direction.
So it's an extremely large sort of space that you are reasoning over. And so the most sophisticated AI systems are not able to tackle any of these sort of problems. So we had a system called AlphaGeometry, which for the first time showed that an AI system can solve geometry problems that are at the International Maths Olympiad level.
So this is like, I mean, how can we describe them? So you sort of will get a picture of some circles and triangles and squares and things.
Yeah.
And then you'll be asked something about, I don't know, how to calculate some seemingly impossible thing from this image based only on what you understand about the rules of circles and squares and triangles.
Yes, something like that.
Yeah, it's really hard.
Yeah, it's quite hard, and you really have to understand not only geometry very well, but you also need to be able to sort of plan ahead and think about what kind of solution can make sense, can lead you to the final answer.
So how does alpha geometry work then?
So alpha geometry, how it works, it transforms this problem, which is given sometimes in text, sometimes in image, into a formal language, into its own domain-specific language in which it can reason about the problem. And then it tries to solve the problem in that language. Now, what the alpha geometry did was very smart. They generated a very, very large number of problems, synthetically generated problems in that language and the corresponding solutions. So with this, they could train the machine learning model on hundreds of thousands of these problems, right? And then that made it extremely effective in, given a new problem of that form, it could solve it.
It just knows from its own experience.
Yes.
Amazing. And actually, I can see the similarities there again between that and the materials science thing. Is like, okay, let's just use combinatorics to
exactly.
Let's just like roll the dice, come up with loads of random things in the beginning, and then narrow it down and narrow it down and narrow it down until eventually it can look at a single problem and say, I know how to solve it.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I'm quite jealous of your job. Okay, we have gone on a wild list of topics here, but what are you hoping to tackle next?
Yeah, so I think there are many problems that remain unsolved in any area that we're working on, whether it's understanding proteins, whether it's understanding the genome, whether it's understanding the weather, whether it's understanding material science. There is just so much work that still remains to be done. We were talking about materials. We are only making predictions about stability of these materials. But how do you extend that to making the prediction about properties of these materials and then synthesizing them?
Have you got a favorite though? Is there one that you're like, that's the one I really want?
No, you can't ask me that question.
I can.
No, I think all.
No, not all your babies are equal. You've got to pick a favorite.
I'm a computer scientist, so I love the computer science work, but like all of them have different elements which are on the day, they're like, wow, this is so amazing. Like when you are trying to learn a policy that is going to control the magnets of a fusion reactor, the day that experiment happens, regardless of what's happening anywhere,
you care most about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there one that you think though will have the biggest impact?
I think the work that we are doing in understanding biology and in understanding chemistry and materials, I think it's so fundamental.
Such root node problems.
Yeah, there are such root node problems that it's difficult to even sort of limit what the impact would be, right? Their effects are difficult to predict.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very much looking forward to coming back and talking to you again to see what other massive things have been happening. Pushmeet, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
What I'm struck by after meeting Pushmeet is that the thing about science, it moves really slowly. And then every now and then, maybe once in a generation, you get this seismic shift. You get a big step forward that fundamentally changes our understanding. But the thing about this shift of using artificial intelligence for science is that this isn't just going to make a difference to physics or one equation in cosmology. It's that this is going to transform all of science, and in the most fundamental way. And okay, I know that I sound like I've just swallowed the hype here, but don't just take my word for this. Go and ask your friendly neighbourhood scientist what they think of what is happening here. Because the people who really understand what this means for the world behind the scenes they don't have words for how big this shift is or is going to be. You have been listening to Google DeepMind, the podcast, with me, Professor Hannah Fry. If you enjoyed that episode, do subscribe to our YouTube channel. And you can also find us on your podcast platform of choice. Now, we have lots more to explore on this podcast, including a deep dive into how AI could enhance education. Plus, should AI assistants be given human traits? That is coming up soon on Google DeepMind, the podcast.